What if the most mysterious myth in history was never a myth at all? Where was Atlantis? Was it a real civilization that vanished in a single night, or just a philosophical allegory hiding a deeper truth? In this video, you'll discover what Plato truly wrote about Atlantis, how its city, army, and unimaginable wealth once looked. You'll learn about the war with Athens and uncover what might have caused the fall of this legendary empire. We'll explore why it was forgotten for 1,000 years, how explorers searched for it from Bimini to Antarctica, and why Atlantis still remains a mystery that haunts the imagination of the entire world. Subscribe for more stories like this, and leave your ideas in the comments. These are stories for sleep, where legend and reality become one. The story of Atlantis doesn't begin in ancient ruins or in myths whispered across generations. Its origins lie in a single text, written at a specific moment by a specific man, the Athenian philosopher Plato. Before him, no trace of Atlantis existed. Not in Sumerian tablets, not in Egyptian hieroglyphs, not in Greek mythology. Everything we know about this mysterious land comes from just two of Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. To understand how this story was born, we must first look at the life of the man who created it, his world, his ideals, and his purpose. Plato was born in the 5th century BCE in Athens, a city weakened by war and internal conflict. His family belonged to the old aristocracy, influential, educated, and deeply involved in politics. Among his relatives were Charmides and Critias, members of the oligarchic regime of the 30 tyrants who seized power after Athens' defeat in the Peloponnesian War. That war had devastated the city, bringing political collapse, economic ruin, and moral decay. Young Plato witnessed the fall of his homeland's ideals, democracy turning to chaos, regimes rising and falling, and citizens driven by greed instead of reason. These experiences shaped his view of what a just society should be. In his youth, Plato became a student of Socrates, the man who would forever change his life. Socrates wrote no books and founded no schools. Instead, he questioned everything: politics, morality, and the very nature of truth. Plato watched as his teacher challenged the blindness of Athenian society, urging people to seek knowledge and virtue. But Athens condemned him. Accused of corrupting the youth and defying the gods, Socrates was sentenced to death. His execution shattered Plato's faith in democracy and led him to a single conclusion: a just state cannot exist unless ruled by those guided by wisdom, not passion. Seeking answers, Plato founded the Academy, the first true school of philosophy and history. There, he taught mathematics, astronomy, logic, ethics, and politics. Within those walls, he wrote his greatest works, including The Republic, his vision of an ideal society governed by reason and virtue. And it was during this same period that he wrote Timaeus and Critias, dialogues that would forever link his name to the legend of Atlantis. Written around 360 BCE, Timaeus begins not with cosmology, but with a story, a mysterious account of an ancient war between Athens and Atlantis, a mighty empire beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato claimed this tale was passed down through generations, from Solon, the great Athenian lawmaker, who heard it from Egyptian priests in the city of Sais, to Critias the elder, then to Critias the younger, and finally to Plato himself. In that story, the Egyptian priest tells Solon, "O Solon, Solon, you Greeks are always children, you have no ancient traditions." He spoke of how wars and cataclysms had erased Greek memory, while Egypt had preserved written records for thousands of years. According to those records, 9,000 years before Solon's time, there existed a vast and powerful civilization, Atlantis. It possessed immense wealth, a mighty navy, and ambition without limits. The Atlanteans sought to conquer the entire known world, even Athens itself. Yet the Athenians, though few and poor, stood firm and defeated the invaders. But victory came at a price. In a single day and night, earthquakes and floods consumed Atlantis, dragging it beneath the ocean, never to be seen again. Thus, the mighty empire vanished, leaving behind only the echo of its name. Plato presented this story not as a myth, but as a historical account, passed down through the ages, anchored in names, places, and dates. Yet scholars still wonder, did he believe it himself? Or was Atlantis a philosophical metaphor, a parable about moral decay and the collapse of societies driven by arrogance and greed? The context of Timaeus suggests that Plato used Atlantis not as history, but as a mirror, a way to discuss cosmic order and the ideal state. Still, he described it with such realism that for centuries, readers have searched for the lost island as if it truly existed. After Timaeus, Plato began writing Critias, meant to describe Atlantis in greater detail, its government, architecture, and daily life. But the dialogue ends abruptly, unfinished. Perhaps he never completed it. Perhaps he chose to leave it incomplete, as if Atlantis itself were meant to vanish into mystery. Later philosophers, including Aristotle, dismissed the story as fiction, a moral tale warning against hubris and corruption. Yet over time, the line between myth and history blurred. And so, the legend endured, not as a record of the past, but as a reflection on how fragile civilizations can be when built not on wisdom and virtue, but on greed, pride, and the hunger for power. When Plato begins his dialogue Critias, he doesn't start with reflections on morality or politics. He begins with a vivid description of a lost world, Atlantis. According to Plato, Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the strait we now know as the Gibraltar Strait, separating the Mediterranean from the Atlantic Ocean. It was an enormous island, larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, stretching across the vast ocean that the Greeks simply called the Outer Sea. Nature there was abundant and rich beyond measure. Fertile plains, great valleys, and mountains covered with forests that provided timber for ships and homes. Rivers flowed down from the highlands, feeding lakes and canals, while hot and cold springs supplied water for homes, gardens, and baths. The island teemed with animals, herds of cattle, goats, sheep, and even elephants, which, as Plato notes, found plenty of food and space to roam. The soil of Atlantis yielded a generous harvest of every imaginable grain, fruit, and vegetable. Its gardens overflowed with fruit trees, and vineyards stretched across the hills. Olive groves and orchards of strange exotic fruits, unknown to the Greeks, filled the air with fragrance. Beyond ordinary crops, the land also produced rare and valuable plants used for medicine, crafts, and perfumes. It was a paradise of natural wealth, a land of abundance, balance, and divine blessing. At the heart of Atlantis stood a magnificent city built around a sacred hill, the place, according to legend, where Poseidon, god of the sea, met and fell in love with a mortal woman named Cleito. To protect her, Poseidon encircled the hill with 3 rings of water and 2 rings of land, forming alternating belts connected by bridges. Each ring had a precise size and proportion, inner channels 3 stadia wide, separated by strips of land, with the outermost canal linked directly to the sea through a great artificial strait. The city's design was extraordinary, every canal connected with the sea, allowing ships to sail right into the heart of the city. Along the waterways stood docks, shipyards, and armories. Bridges arched across the canals, and massive gates and towers guarded the inner city. The walls were built from 3 kinds of stone, white, black, and red, all quarried from the island itself. The inner wall was plated with orichalcum, the middle with tin, and the outer with copper, making the city shimmer with brilliance under the sun. In the very center rose a colossal temple of Poseidon and Cleito, its outer walls covered in silver, and the inner chambers lined with orichalcum. Within the temple stood a gigantic statue of Poseidon, seated on a chariot drawn by 6 winged horses. Around him were the statues of his 10 sons, born from Cleito, the divine rulers of the 10 regions of Atlantis. Beside the temple towered the royal palace, a vast complex of halls, chambers, gardens, and terraces. The floors were inlaid with mosaics of ivory, gold, and precious stones. The walls gleamed with copper panels, and the roofs shone with tin ornaments. The inner gardens were lush with exotic plants, fountains, pools of salt and fresh water, and shaded walkways. It was a world of balance between divine beauty and human craftsmanship. The wealth of Atlantis rested on its advanced agriculture, its skilled artisans, rich mineral deposits, and vast maritime trade. The Great Plain surrounding the capital was an enormous rectangle, divided by a network of parallel canals for irrigation and transport. Each district had its own economic and military specialization. Plato even describes the exact number of chariots, infantry, archers, and ships each region was required to provide in times of war. The Atlanteans lived under a precise and well-ordered system of governance, a blend of divine law and human discipline, inherited from their first king, Atlas, and his brothers. Politically, Atlantis was a confederation of 10 kingdoms, each ruled by a descendant of Poseidon. The supreme authority belonged to the eldest king, the ruler of the central city, while the others retained autonomy within their realms. Major decisions were made in a grand council that gathered before the temple of Poseidon. Before each session, the kings performed a sacred ritual. They hunted a bull without weapons, offered it in sacrifice, washed their hands in its blood, and swore oaths before the altar to uphold the laws, protect justice, and preserve order. For many generations, Atlantis flourished. Its people honored the gods, obeyed the laws, and valued virtue above all. Wealth did not corrupt them, power did not turn into tyranny, and their society remained in harmony with the divine order. But as time passed, the divine spark within them began to fade. Greed, pride, and ambition slowly replaced wisdom and justice. Their palaces grew more lavish, their feasts more extravagant, and their armies more aggressive. The rulers no longer cared for the well-being of their people, but sought to expand their power beyond the island. Thus began the gradual fall of Atlantis, a civilization that had once embodied harmony, but turned away from the gods and pursued dominion over the world. According to Plato, this moral decay marked the beginning of Atlantis' end. The mighty empire, corrupted by its own ambition, set out to conquer foreign lands and subjugate all nations. But its expansion met resistance from none other than the free city of Athens. And so began the conflict that would end not only Atlantis' power, but the very existence of the island itself, swallowed by the sea, and remembered only in legend. When Plato, in his dialogue Critias, turns to the fate of Atlantis, he begins with the moment when the great island, having reached unimaginable power, ceased to be content with its own wealth, order, and prosperity, and turned its gaze upon the world beyond. The Atlanteans sought to extend their rule over all lands, both within and beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the legendary gates of the known world. According to the Egyptian priests, from whom this story supposedly came, Atlantis had already conquered many islands and large territories along the Mediterranean coasts, spreading its dominion over Libya up to Egypt and over Europe to Tyrrhenia. The peoples of these lands paid tribute in gold, livestock, metals, ships, and soldiers, everything required to sustain the empire's might. But the desire for further conquest was no longer driven by security or necessity. It was born from moral decay, a spiritual corruption that began when the divine spark within the Atlanteans started to fade. Their actions became ruled by greed, ambition, and the lust for boundless power. In that moment, the rulers of Atlantis made a fatal decision. They resolved to subjugate Athens, a city which, according to the priest's account, was then far different from the Athens known to later generations. The ancient Athens, as Plato describes them, were a society built not upon wealth or military might, but upon virtue, justice, and divine law, the sacred principles bestowed by the goddess Athena. The Athenians lived simply. They worked hard, honored the gods, and sought harmony with nature and with one another. It was a city governed not by money or force, but by reason, law, and mutual respect, an ideal polis where moral strength outweighed all material power. When the rulers of Atlantis sent envoys to Athens, demanding submission and tribute, the Athenians answered without hesitation. They refused to yield, declaring that no foreign power would ever rule their city. Knowing that compromise was impossible, they began preparations for war. In response, Atlantis mobilized its immense forces. According to Plato, the Atlantean army was vast beyond measure, thousands of chariots, tens of thousands of infantrymen, countless cavalry units, and a navy capable of crossing the ocean and blockading entire coasts. The foundries roared day and night. Weapons were forged, ships constructed, provisions stockpiled, a war machine unlike any the world had seen before. Realizing they faced a far stronger enemy, the Athenians called upon every citizen able to bear arms. The city fortified its walls, strengthened defenses, and prepared for a siege. But above all, they placed their faith in the unity of their people and in the gods who watched over them. The first stage of the war began at sea. The Atlantean navy sailed to Attica, seeking to blockade Athens and cut off its trade routes. Yet the Athenians, anticipating this, built swift and agile ships, far lighter and better suited for coastal warfare than the heavy vessels of Atlantis. The sea battles were fierce and prolonged. The Athenians, struck by night, ambushed enemy fleets in narrow bays and used their intimate knowledge of the coastline to devastating effect. Despite their overwhelming numbers, the Atlanteans failed to achieve victory at sea. After several crushing defeats, they turned to a land invasion. The Atlantean army landed on the shores of Attica and advanced toward Athens, confident of a swift victory. But the Athenians, using the rugged terrain to their advantage, fortified mountain passes and built traps along narrow roads. Battles raged not for days, but for months. The Athenians launched sudden counterattacks, ambushed supply lines, and wore down their enemy with relentless precision. The Atlanteans, accustomed to quick triumphs, found themselves mired in a long, exhausting war, their numbers no longer a decisive advantage. The war reached its climax when the Athenians feigned retreat, luring the main Atlantean forces into a narrow valley where ambushes had been set on all sides. Arrows, stones, and spears rained down upon the trapped invaders. The Atlanteans tried to break through, but the terrain denied them the use of their chariots and heavy troops. The battle ended in complete disaster for Atlantis. At the same time, the Athenian fleet struck at the enemy ships anchored near the shore, burning and sinking them, cutting off any chance of retreat. The mighty army of Atlantis was annihilated. The Athenians stood victorious, not through wealth or strength, but through courage, virtue, and unity. Yet this was not the end of the story. Defeated, humiliated, and weakened, Atlantis soon faced an even greater enemy: the forces of nature. Earthquakes, floods, and the fury of the sea consumed the island. In a single dreadful night, the great empire vanished beneath the waves, leaving behind only legend and a warning that no power built upon greed and pride can endure forever. As Plato's dialogue, Critias, reaches its climax, he describes a turning point when the gods, watching over Atlantis, could no longer remain silent. The people, once noble and virtuous, had lost their way. They abandoned moderation and justice, giving themselves over to greed, arrogance, and the hunger for power. The island that had once embodied harmony and divine order had betrayed the sacred laws set by Poseidon himself. The balance between gods and men was broken, and so Zeus, ruler of Olympus, summoned the immortals to his heavenly hall to decide the fate of Atlantis, the proud island that had defied the will of the gods. Plato paints the scene vividly. Zeus rises among the gods, looking down upon the earth, his gaze stern, his voice about to thunder, and then silence. The dialogue ends before his words are spoken, yet the outcome is clear. Atlantis was doomed. Soon after, disaster struck, sudden, merciless, and absolute. In a single day and night, the island was swallowed by the sea. The earth split open, tremors shattered the cities, waves as tall as mountains devoured the coast, temples, palaces, harbors, gardens, all vanished beneath the waters. Where once stood the shining temples of Poseidon, now there was only a vast, empty sea. Plato tells us that shallow waters and treacherous shoals remained for centuries, the silent grave of a lost world. But Plato makes one thing clear: the fall of Atlantis was not a natural accident, it was punishment. The gods did not care how rich the temples had become, nor how vast the armies or magnificent the cities. What mattered was the sacred order. the harmony between humans, the cosmos, and the divine. When that order was broken, retribution was inevitable. Atlantis fell first to Athens, the city that embodied justice and balance, and then to the wrath of nature itself, guided by divine will. And yet, in one of the most mysterious turns in philosophy, Plato does not describe the catastrophe itself. He gives us only the result, the silence after destruction. Why? Perhaps he left the story unfinished so that every listener would imagine the fall of Atlantis in their own mind. Perhaps he wanted to remind us that the true message lies not in the details of ruin, but in its cause, the loss of virtue. Some scholars believe Plato intended to continue the tale in a final dialogue, a work called Hermocrates, which would have completed the trilogy begun with Timaeus and Critias. That dialogue was never written, or perhaps lost forever. Maybe it would have told of the world after the flood, of the lessons humanity was meant to learn. We can only guess. And so, the story of Atlantis remains more than a myth. It is a warning. Even the greatest civilizations, rich, powerful, and brilliant, crumble when they lose their moral foundation. When justice, virtue, and reverence for the divine fade away, collapse is only a matter of time. Atlantis vanished beneath the waves, but its memory endured, whispered through centuries, retold by poets, philosophers, and dreamers, a legend half remembered, yet never truly forgotten. After Plato revealed the story of Atlantis to the world, the fate of this legend fell into silence for centuries. To the generations that followed, it became less a record of history and more a philosophical parable, a moral tale about the dangers of pride and the fall of great nations. Even Aristotle, Plato's own student, claimed that his teacher had invented Atlantis purely for didactic reasons, to illustrate his ideas about law, virtue, and the perfect state. In the centuries that followed, none of the great historians, not Herodotus, Polybius, Strabo, or Pliny the Elder, paid any real attention to the tale. Atlantis vanished from chronicles and maps alike, reduced to a metaphor, a symbol of moral decay and divine punishment. In late antiquity, as Neoplatonism replaced the classical schools of thought, the name of Atlantis survived only as an allegory. Philosophers who discuss the structure of the cosmos or the immortality of the soul might mention it as a symbol, not of geography, but of cosmic order and its inevitable fall. To them, Atlantis was no longer a lost island, but the reflection of a civilization that had turned away from the divine. It became a story not of cataclysm, but of moral ruin, a warning that every empire carries the seed of its own destruction. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed, the world entered a new era, the Middle Ages. The focus of thought shifted from philosophy to faith, from reason to salvation. The ancient dialogues of Plato survived only in monasteries, carefully copied by scribes and guarded in the libraries of Constantinople. In the Muslim world, scholars preserved and studied them, yet even there, Atlantis was nothing more than a faint echo in the background. Medieval thinkers did not deny its existence. They simply did not care. Their imagination was filled with biblical tales, Sodom and Gomorrah, the Great Flood, the Tower of Babel. In that world of miracles and divine will, Atlantis found no place. On medieval maps, one could find paradisiacal islands, lands of saints, or places said to hide holy relics, yet never Atlantis. The idea of a lost continent beyond the ocean did not fit the medieval worldview, and so the legend faded, quiet, almost erased. But it did not die. Hidden in the copied manuscripts of Plato, whispered by Byzantine philosophers and Arab scholars, the name of Atlantis endured, silent, waiting. It survived the darkness of the Middle Ages, carried through time by those who refused to let knowledge perish. Centuries later, when Europe awoke once again to the legacy of the ancients, the legend began to stir. The Renaissance brought new curiosity, and the age of exploration opened the oceans. As ships sailed westward toward the unknown, philosophers and dreamers began to wonder, could Atlantis be real after all? Was it hidden beneath the waves? Could it be connected to the New World itself? The silent legend of Plato's time was reborn, now not just as a myth, but as a mystery to be solved. With the end of the Middle Ages and the dawn of the Renaissance, Europe's fascination with the legacy of the ancient world was reborn. Scholars began once again to study the works of Plato, including the dialogues where the mysterious tale of Atlantis first appeared. What for centuries had been regarded as a philosophical parable now returned to the center of serious discussion, not only among philosophers, but also among geographers, travelers, sailors, and mapmakers. It was the age when Europe began to push beyond its known borders. Portuguese and Spanish ships crossed the Pillars of Hercules, venturing deep into the Atlantic, discovering new islands and lands unknown to the ancients. The sudden appearance of the Azores, Canary Islands, and Madeira on European maps sparked a fascinating question. Could these islands be the remnants of the great lost land described by Plato? Some began to believe that the story of Atlantis was not a mere allegory, but a distant memory of a real civilization swallowed by the sea. The Azores, lying in the very heart of the Atlantic, seemed to fit Plato's description perfectly. Mountainous peaks rising from the depths, perhaps the last visible summits of a sunken continent. The Canary Islands soon became another focus of speculation. European explorers encountered the Guanches, a mysterious people who had preserved unique traditions, ancient rituals, and legends of ancestors who came from great lands now lost beneath the waves. Many believed these legends were echoes of Atlantis itself, and that the Guanches were the last descendants of those who survived the cataclysm. Then came the most daring idea of all. With the discovery of the New World, some began to claim that Atlantis was America itself, a vast hidden continent beyond the ocean, perfectly matching Plato's mysterious world beyond the pillars. The size of the continent and the astonishing achievements of the Maya, Aztec, and Inca civilizations amazed European minds. Their cities, temples, roads, and astronomical knowledge seemed far too advanced to have developed in isolation. To many, it appeared that these cultures must have inherited wisdom from an ancient, forgotten world, perhaps from Atlantis. These ideas soon appeared in the works of philosophers, chroniclers, and geographers. On maps of the 16th century, one could often find inscriptions such as Atlantis or Island of Atlantis placed in the most unexpected parts of the Atlantic, from the Bermuda region to the Caribbean Sea and the coast of Brazil. Some cartographers imagined Atlantis as a massive drowned continent. Others drew it as a chain of islands, the broken remains of a sunken empire. Gradually, more rational voices began to emerge. Scholars tried to explain Atlantis not through myth, but through natural processes. Perhaps, they argued, the island had disappeared due to powerful earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or the slow subsidence of the Earth's crust beneath the sea. The theory seemed plausible. After all, history had already witnessed similar disasters. The eruption of Santorini, which destroyed the Minoan civilization, became, for many, the perfect model for the destruction of Atlantis. Despite centuries of speculation, no solid evidence of Atlantis was ever found. Not in the Azores, nor in the Canaries, not in the Caribbean, nor the Americas. Archaeologists discovered no ruins, no artifacts, no traces of a civilization matching Plato's grand vision. And yet, the very possibility that beyond the horizon there might exist a lost land continued to captivate human imagination. Over time, the search for Atlantis transcended geography and archaeology. The story became a philosophical reflection on the fate of civilizations, a literary utopia, a symbol of a lost golden age. It inspired writers, travelers, and mystics alike. Atlantis was no longer just a sunken island. It was a metaphor for humanity's eternal longing for perfection and paradise lost beneath the waves.